Bill walked through the busy streets of the city, pushing his old cart with its creaking wheels, as he did every day. He wore a worn-out shirt with the sleeves rolled up and worn-out pants full of stains from years of hard work. His hands, scarred by time and effort, were always steady as he rummaged through the garbage in search of recyclable materials to sell. This was how he supported his grandchildren, doing what he could to offer them a decent life, even with such limited resources. The heat that morning seemed more intense, and sweat dripped down Bill's forehead as he wiped his face with a handkerchief that had already yellowed from use. In his mind, he calculated how much he could raise that day to buy food and perhaps something special for his grandchildren. As he was organizing the cans and bottles in his trolley, a cheerful, vibrant voice interrupted his thoughts. "Hello, sir. Can I talk to you for a minute?" Surprised, Bill looked up to see a young man with a friendly smile and a camera slung over his shoulder. He was wearing stylish clothes with a leather jacket and a cap that looked like it had just come from a designer store. It was easy to see that he wasn't there by chance, especially the way he looked at Bill with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Me?" asked Bill, pointing to himself in confusion. "Yes, you," replied the young man, laughing. "My name is Jake. I'm a YouTuber, and I make videos to show inspiring stories. And today I have a proposition for you." Bill remained silent, a little suspicious. He had heard of people who made videos on the internet, but never imagined that anyone would be interested in him or his story. Even so, his curiosity was greater than his caution. "An offer? What kind of offer?" Bill asked without looking away, trying to understand what this young man could possibly want with him. Jake smiled and moved a little closer. "Well, my channel does challenges and we often help people out. Today, I'd like to give you my credit card for 24 hours so that you could buy whatever you want. It's all on me," he explained as he took out a shiny card from his wallet and held it out to Bill. The elderly man blinked several times, trying to process what he had just heard. The idea seemed so surreal that he even let out a laugh, thinking it was a joke. "Do you want to give me a credit card so I can buy whatever I want?" Bill asked with a skeptical tone. Jake nodded, keeping his smile. "That's right. It's a card with no limits, so you can use it for anything you need without worrying about the amount. There's just one rule. You have to use it all within the next 24 hours. "How's that?" Bill looked at the card suspiciously, wondering if it was really true or if he was being played a cruel joke. For a moment, he was silent, just staring at Jake, as if trying to read the sincerity in the boy's eyes. "This is serious, isn't it?" Bill asked, almost in a whisper. "Absolutely serious, sir," confirmed Jake, keeping his gaze firm and sincere. "In fact, the idea is to document your experience and show my audience how generosity can change lives. But more than that, it's a way of helping someone special, and you seem to be the perfect person for that." Bill felt a pang of emotion in his chest. He knew that with that card, he could do much more than just buy some clothes and food for his grandchildren. It could perhaps solve problems that he had been carrying around for years and even help his community, which was also struggling on a daily basis. "Well, I don't know what to say, boy," said Bill, still incredulous. "Why me? I mean, there are so many people in need." "I know, sir, and you're one of them too," replied Jake with a more serious tone. "When I looked at you working hard, doing whatever it takes to take care of those you love, I saw someone who deserves this opportunity. So, what do you say?" Bill took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that decision. He wasn't one to ask for help or accept charity easily, but something in that young man's eyes convinced him that this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Still unsure if it was real, he reached out a trembling hand and took the card, feeling the cold plastic between his fingers. "I accept. I'll take you up on your offer, Jake, and I really appreciate it." Jake smiled even more, happy with Bill's decision, and shook his hand firmly. "Great. Now, I'm going to accompany you during the day, but don't worry. I'll try to be as non-invasive as possible. I want you to feel free to do whatever you want." Bill nodded, still in a mixture of nervousness and excitement. He looked at the card in his hands, trying to understand the weight of that responsibility. Would he buy first? How would he use this unexpected gift to really make a difference? Jake noticed Bill's reflective look and, not wanting to interrupt his thoughts, just added, "And remember, sir, This is an opportunity to achieve what you've always dreamed of for your family. Don't worry about what other people will think. This is your day." Bill shook his head, absorbing the words. It was as if, suddenly, the weight of years of work and sacrifice had been rewarded. He took a deep breath and finally gave Jake a small smile. "Well, I think I know where to start." Bill still held the card with a mixture of awe and reverence, as if he were dealing with something sacred. He walked through the busy streets, now with Jake and a small camera crew a few paces behind, recording every detail. Thoughts raced through his mind, and the first image that came to mind was of his grandchildren. He thought of their faces, the worn-out clothes they wore, and the torn backpacks they carried to school. "I think I'll start with them," Bill muttered to himself, but loud enough for Jake to hear. "Your grandchildren?" Jake asked with an approving smile. "Yes, I have 2 small grandchildren. They're the reason I wake up every day and face whatever it takes," replied Bill, looking firm and proud. Determined, he headed for the nearest clothes store. As he entered, he was greeted by a young saleswoman who, on seeing his worn-out clothes and the cart of recyclables parked in the entrance, hesitated for a moment before smiling. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help you?" Bill, a little embarrassed, nodded slightly. "Yes, please. I'm looking for clothes for my grandchildren. I need coats, pants, warm thing for the coming winter." The saleswoman smiled, now more comfortable, and began to show him the options. Meanwhile, Bill picked up the clothes carefully, feeling the texture of the fabrics, checking the sizes with an attention that revealed the affection he had for those boys. "They're going to love this," he said quietly, holding up a soft blue wool coat, the perfect size for his youngest grandson. It's been a long time since they've had something like this, new and beautiful. Jake, observing the scene, moved closer to film the moment without interfering. He knew that Bill's every choice carried a deep emotion, and he wanted the audience to be able to feel it too. Bill, with a pile of clothes in his arms, finally walked up to the cashier. He hesitated a little as he handed over his card, but took a deep breath, remembering that Jake had guaranteed that everything would be paid for by him. "Here you are," said Bill, holding out the card to the clerk, who looked at him curiously. "Are these presents for your grandchildren?" she asked, trying to make conversation. Bill smiled proudly. "Yes, they deserve it. They're good children. They always help me at home and at school. They never complain, even with so little." The clerk smiled and handed over the card. Bill waited, his heart beating fast, until the payment was approved. He let out a sigh of relief when the machine beeped to confirm the purchase. Leaving the store with the bags in his hands, Bill headed for the next place on his mental list, a supermarket. He wanted to ensure that evening, his grandchildren would have a dinner like never before. He pushed a trolley through the supermarket sections, picking up fruit, fresh vegetables, meat, and even some sweets, which he could rarely afford. "And the boys love ice cream," he commented, grinning at Jake as he put 2 jars in the trolley. Jake just smiled, seeing Bill's enthusiasm. Today is a party day for them, so take what you want. As he continued to fill the trolley, Bill remembered his grandchildren's excited faces when they saw the food on the table. He stopped in front of a shelf with packets of bread and, after choosing a large packet, commented once again, "It may not seem like much, but this makes a huge difference. Today they're going to feel special. They're going to have a real meal." The moment was full of meaning for Bill, and Jake knew it was important to record the sincerity of that gesture. As soon as they had finished shopping, they went to the cashier and, once again, Bill held out his card, feeling more confident this time. The payment went through, and he sighed with relief. With the bags in hand, Bill made a point of walking home to store the clothes and food. When he arrived, he was greeted by his grandchildren, who ran up to him with their eyes shining, curious about the full bags. "Grandpa, what's all this?" asked the youngest, barely able to contain his excitement. "Grandpa got a present today," said Bill, smiling, "and I thought you guys should enjoy it with me." The grandchildren opened the bags, laughing and hugging each other as they took in the new clothes and admired each item. Their reaction touched Bill deeply, and he struggled to hold back the tears. Those little moments meant everything to him. After watching his grandchildren trying on the clothes and playing around, Bill went back to concentrating on what he needed to do. He knew he still had a few hours with the card, and he wanted to do more. There was a sense of urgency inside him, a desire to do something that would really make an impact. "Come on, Jake. There's one more thing I need to do," said Bill, turning to the young YouTuber who was accompanying him. Jake, always with his camera in hand, followed Bill, curious to see what the next step would be. With his heart still full of emotion at seeing his grandchildren's joy, Bill felt he needed to go further. He knew that his community, made up largely of people who struggled just as much as he did to survive, also deserved a slice of that unexpected gift. Feeling refreshed, he turned to Jake and said with a twinkle in his eye, "I want to use what's left to help my neighbors. We always share what we have, even when it's little. And today, I think I can give back a little of what I've already received." Jake smiled, amazed at Bill's generous spirit. "Sure, Bill. Let's do it." Determined, Bill walked to the neighborhood convenience store. He knew most of the families in the area and knew that many of them were going through similar difficulties to his own. As soon as he entered the store, he was greeted by the owner, a middle-aged man who had also known Bill for years. "Bill, what a surprise to see you here with so many bags," said the man, looking at the items he was carrying. Bill gave a shy smile. "Today's a different day, my friend. I've received some help from an angel disguised as a boy," he said, pointing at Jake with a smile. "I'm here to buy some things that can help our people." The owner smiled, touched by Bill's words. He knew the man's kindness and humility, and was even more surprised to see him with a credit card in his hand, ready to make a generous purchase. Bill began filling bags with essential products: rice, beans, sugar, powdered milk, and oil. They were basic items, but they made all the difference in the daily lives of those struggling to put food on the table. With each product he put in the cart, he remembered a family, a friend, a neighbor who would be happy to receive that little bit of help. "They have no idea what's coming," he muttered, as he picked up another packet of pasta and put it on the pile. Jake watched him, taking in every detail, but without interfering. He knew that this moment was pure and full of meaning, and he didn't want to get in the way. After filling several bags, Bill went to the cashier and, with trembling hands, handed over the card once more. Each time he used that piece of plastic, he felt a mixture of fear and gratitude. But when he saw the payment approval on the screen, he felt immense relief. "Thank you for your help, my friend. This day will be remembered for a long time, and not just by me," said Bill to the owner. "God bless you, Bill. You deserve all this and more," the man replied, shaking his hand firmly. With their bags full, Bill and Jake left the store and headed towards the neighborhood where he lived. Along the way, they began distributing the food to their neighbors. Each family that received Bill's visit was surprised and thrilled, not believing that he was there, delivering bags full of food and essential items. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Martha, opened the door with a tired look on her face, but soon smiled when she saw Bill with the bags. "Bill, what's this? Are you handing out presents today?" she asked jokingly. "Today is a special day, Martha. Someone has given me a unique opportunity, and I want to share it with those who have always been by my side." Martha was thrilled as she took the bag and hugged Bill gratefully. "You don't know how much this will help, Bill. Thank you so much." Each delivery carried an exchange of words, a look of gratitude, and the silent promise that, somehow, everyone there would be ready to repay the gesture. Jake, who until then had been filming everything in silence, approached Bill in a moment of pause. "Bill, you could have spent it all on yourself, but you chose to share. That's incredible," he said, his voice slightly broken. Bill smiled, giving the young man a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Jake, living alone doesn't make sense. I've been through tough times, and I know how important it is to have someone to hold your hand. Today, I was able to be that helping hand for them." As they walked to the next house, Bill looked up at the sky, as if he were talking to someone up there. "I hope they know that this is just a little help, and that I'll be here for them whatever they need." At the end of the afternoon, with the sun setting and his heart full of gratitude, Bill finished his deliveries. He felt that, with those small bags of groceries, he had done more than simply help his community. He had reaffirmed the bonds that held them together, even in times of scarcity. With the last deliveries made, Bill and Jake stood in front of the old man's house, watching the quiet movement of the neighborhood as the lights of the houses began to come on. "What now, Bill? How are you feeling?" Jake asked, genuinely curious. Bill looked around, took a deep breath, and replied, I feel like I'm the richest man in the world today, richer than I ever thought I would be. As dusk fell over the city, Bill felt that his mission for the day wasn't over yet. There was one last thing he needed to do, and this thought followed him like an insistent current. He knew that time was running out, but the need to try one last time for someone special wouldn't leave him alone. He looked at Jake with a determined countenance. "Jake, there's one more thing I need to try before time runs out," said Bill with an urgency in his voice. Jake saw the seriousness in Bill's gaze and nodded. "Of course, Bill. Where are we going now? I need to go to the hospital. My youngest grandson, Jimmy, is ill and the treatment is expensive. I wish I could pay for it today, at least get started." Jake just nodded, understanding the importance of the gesture. They quickly got into Jake's car, which sped off towards the hospital. The silence between the two was heavy, with Bill holding the card between his fingers, as if it were his last hope of saving his grandson. Arriving at the hospital, Bill and Jake entered through the automatic doors, welcomed by the sterile smell and the silence interrupted only by the sound of footsteps and machines in the corridors. At the reception desk, a receptionist looked up, observing Bill and the card in his hand. "Good evening. What can I do for you?" she asked with a polite smile. Bill, taking a deep breath, approached the counter and explained in an embarrassed voice, "My grandson, Jimmy, is hospitalized here. He needs expensive treatment, and today I'd like to make a payment to start the treatment." The attendant, a little surprised, looked at him and then at Jake, who was recording everything from a distance. She examined the card with caution, but still proceeded with the service. "Right, sir. Can I see the patient's full name and the amount you want to cover?" Bill hesitated for a moment, looking at the card as if he wanted to absorb all the energy it represented. "I want to pay for the whole treatment if possible," he said, his voice firm. The receptionist consulted the system and entered the information, while time passed slowly for Bill. He looked at the clock on the wall, aware that the minutes were ticking away. Finally, the clerk looked at him again with a confused expression. "Sir, I'm sorry, but payment has been refused. It seems that the card is blocked or expired." Bill felt his heart sink, and his face showed a mixture of frustration and sadness. He shook his head, as if he didn't want to believe it. Jake approached, sensing his friend's despair. "What's going on?" Jake asked, staring at the receptionist. She looked at them both with an apprehensive expression. "The card has been declined, sir. And, should I ask, where did the card come from?" Bill swallowed, trying to explain. "This card was given to me by a friend, for just one day. I thought I'd still have time." The clerk raised an eyebrow, not hiding her suspicion. "For one day? Sir, unfortunately, it's not common, a situation like this." Without further explanation, she called security, and Bill felt panic rise in his chest. Two security guards approached, watching the elderly man with serious eyes. "I need you to come with us, sir. We need to clarify this situation," said one of the security guards, firmly but politely. Bill looked at Jake, who was now turning off the camera and coming to his side, ready to support him. "I didn't do anything wrong. Please let me call the owner of the card. He can explain everything," pleaded Bill, his voice trembling. One of the security guards, sensing the sincerity in Bill's eyes, signaled to the receptionist. "All right, sir, you can make the call, but we're going to stay here until this is resolved." Bill, with trembling hands, dialed the number of Jake, the young YouTuber, who answered almost immediately. "Jake, it's me. I'm in hospital, but they think I stole the card. They've blocked payment." On the other end of the line, the YouTuber answered without hesitation. "Stay calm, Bill. I'm on my way. Don't worry. I'll clear everything up." A few minutes later, Jake arrived at the hospital, approaching the receptionist and the security guards. In a calm voice, he explained the situation, even showing videos from his channel to prove that this was part of a project, a helping hand that he had decided to offer Bill. "This card was given by me, and I'm responsible for any use he makes of it. He hasn't done anything wrong," said Jake with a firm tone. The receptionist, a little relieved, nodded and sighed. "I understand. I apologize, gentlemen. I was just following protocol." After resolving the situation, Jake turned to Bill, who, relieved not to have been taken away, still felt the weight of disappointment at not being able to help his grandson. "Bill, I am sorry. I should have explained that the card expired after exactly 24 hours. I didn't think time could run out so quickly. Bill shrugged with a sad smile. I know, Jake. I tried to do everything I could. I thought there would be time, but in the end, I prefer to take care of what I thought was more urgent first. Jake was silent for a moment, watching the man in front of him, who hadn't just used the card for himself, but to improve the lives of everyone around him. He understood there that Bill was a man of unshakable values, someone who put the well-being of others above his own desires. Bill, you are an extraordinary person. Your grandson is lucky to have someone like you, and I was lucky to meet you too. Bill looked at Jake, touched. Thank you, Jake. Even though I wasn't able to pay for Jimmy's treatment, you gave me something more important today. The chance to see smiles and bring joy to those I love. Jake nodded, touched by Bill's words. They sat in silence for a moment, respecting the weight of the situation, but they both knew that the day wasn't over yet. Jake and Bill were sitting side by side on the bench in front of the hospital, their faces illuminated by the soft light of dusk. The silence between them was profound, as if they both needed to process what had just happened. Bill, with his gaze fixed on the ground, was still holding Jake's card, as if he could feel the weight of the opportunity that had passed him by. Jake, noticing the sadness in Bill, who had previously stood firm all day, decided to break the silence. Bill, you did what you thought was most important. You bought food and clothes for your grandchildren and helped families in your community. That means a lot. Bill sighed, shaking his head slowly. I know, Jake, and I'm grateful for that. But it's just, he paused, his voice breaking. When I saw my grandchildren's smiles, and when I handed those bags to my neighbors, I thought I'd made the right choice. But now, looking back on it all, I just wish I'd given Jimmy a chance to heal. Jake felt the sincerity in the old man's gaze and realized the weight he was carrying. You know, Bill, even without the treatment, you've already given him something very important. Your presence, your support, your love. And that perhaps has an even greater value. Jake smiled, trying to comfort Bill. Bill let out a light, sad laugh. Maybe, but sometimes it seems that love isn't enough, Jake. We fight, we do what we can, but the world always seems to have something more to teach us. He looked off towards the horizon, thoughtful. Even so, if I could do it all over again, I'd make the same choices. That's what calms me down. Jake nodded in admiration of Bill's strength. And that's why I'm here, Bill, to learn from you. I'm sure many will be inspired by this story. Bill, however, shook his head, looking back at the young YouTuber. Jake, being an example, it's strange to think like that. I'm just trying to be the best I can. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this out loud, to show a bit of this reality. Jake smiled, putting his hand on Bill's shoulder. And you did it in the best possible way, Bill. Suddenly, Jake's phone vibrated. He glanced at it quickly, and when he saw the notification, his expression seemed to change to something more serious. He looked at Bill and stood up slowly. You know, Bill, my time with the card may be over, but my admiration for you isn't yet. I'll find a way to keep helping. I think you and Jimmy deserve more than just a special day. Bill raised his eyebrows in surprise, and a shy smile formed on his face. Jake, I've asked for so much. You've done so much. I don't want to abuse your goodwill. It's not abuse, Bill. It's justice. You've earned every bit of help, and Jimmy deserves a chance. Jake looked steadily at the old man. And besides, I wanted to make you an offer. Something that could help us make a difference together. Bill was confused for a moment, but listened carefully. What kind of proposal? Jake hesitated, smiling. I know you like writing. I heard when you told me about your dream of creating stories. He took a deep breath, continuing. How about helping me on the channel? Be an assistant writer, someone who helps me tell these stories truthfully, like you did today? Bill stood in shock for a moment, feeling his heart race. He could hardly believe the opportunity he was hearing about. The dream of sharing stories, of being able to use his creativity. It was something he had buried a long time ago due to life's difficulties. Jake, are you serious? Me? Working on your channel? He laughed nervously. I don't know anything about manuscripts or technology. Bill, what you have is the most important thing. Authenticity, heart, and a lot of life experience. These are things that even the best of writers can't fake. The rest, The technical stuff, I'll teach you over time." Bill remained silent, absorbing the idea. He felt as if he had gone back in time, rescued a forgotten piece of his soul. I accept, Jake. I can't thank you enough, but I'll do my best." Jake smiled broadly and held out his hand. "Then we're together, Bill." They shook hands, sealing an agreement that went beyond a simple employment contract. For Jake, it was a way of doing justice to a man of integrity, and for Bill, it was the chance to finally show the world what he had to share. The weight of night was beginning to fall on the city, but their hearts were lighter. Bill now felt that he was no longer alone on his journey. And at that moment, he realized that sometimes true opportunities come in unexpected ways, leading to a transformation even more profound than he could have imagined. The next morning, Bill woke up with renewed purpose. Sunlight streamed in through the small window of his bedroom, bringing with it a sense of hope. As he got up, he still wondered if everything that had happened the day before had been real or just a good dream. But then, when he saw his grandchildren's new clothes folded neatly and Jimmy smile as he slept, he knew it had all been real. In the kitchen, while preparing a simple breakfast for his grandchildren, Bill reflected on the new chance Jake had offered him. Working as an assistant writer for the channel of one of the most popular YouTubers was an opportunity he had never imagined. Even though he was afraid he wouldn't be up to it, his heart was full of enthusiasm. Jake arrived at Bill's house a short time later, greeting him with the same vibrant smile as the day before. "Good morning, Bill. Are you ready to start?" Bill smiled back, but there was a certain hesitation in his gaze. "Good morning, Jake." "Yes, I am. Or at least I think I am." Jake noticed Bill's anxiety and put his hand on his shoulder. "Let's take it slow. Today, I just want to introduce you to the process. It'll be easy, I promise." Bill took a deep breath, feeling a little more relieved. "Right then, I'm in your hands." The two of them made their way to Jake's studio, a modern and welcoming environment, full of equipment that shone and seemed otherworldly to Bill. He looked around in awe, trying to understand every detail. "So Bill, let me explain how it works. Every video starts with an idea. Sometimes it's a real story. Other times it's something we've thought up to touch people, like what we did yesterday." Jake smiled, taking a seat next to him. "From that idea, we create a script that brings emotion, that engages people." Bill listened carefully to every word, his eyes shining. He could feel Jake's passion for his work and began to understand the impact those stories had on viewers' lives. "But Jake, what if I don't know how to tell these stories the right way? I don't have the same experience as you." Jake shook his head, reassuring him. "Bill, no one knows the struggles and feelings better than you. That's exactly why you're here. I don't want someone who writes like me. I want someone who writes from the heart, like you do." Bill smiled more confidently and nodded. "So, what should I do today?" Jake opened a document on his computer and showed it to Bill. "I'm going to help you write a script. We'll take an idea and develop it together. I'll ask you a few questions and, based on your answers, we'll turn it into a story." Bill nodded, taking a deep breath. Jake began to explain the story they had in mind for that day. That of a man who had overcome difficulties and learned important lessons about resilience and hope, something Bill knew well. While Jake wrote down the main points, Bill began to share his own ideas, telling details about how he imagined the character, what he would face, and the choices he would make along the way. "I see this man as someone who loves his family above all else, who would do anything to protect them, even if it meant sacrificing his own dreams," said Bill, with an intensity in his voice that made Jake smile. "Perfect, Bill. Let's use that. How would he act in a dangerous situation?" Jake encouraged, typing quickly. Bill closed his eyes for a moment, trying to visualize the scene. He would face danger with courage, but with humility, always remembering why he is fighting. He would be like a father who just wants to see his children well. Jake remained silent, absorbing every word. He knew he had found something special in Bill, an authenticity that few possessed. "And what would he say at the end of the story?" Jake asked, curious to know how Bill would conclude his character arc. Bill thought for a moment before answering, his voice firm. He would say something like, "I've learned that strength doesn't come from what you have, but from what you're willing to lose for the one you love." Jake stopped typing and looked at Bill, impressed. Bill, that was incredible. That's the kind of message that really touches people. You have a gift, you know that. Bill smiled, still a little embarrassed, but happy to hear those words. I think I've only lived long enough to understand a few things, Jake. But I'm happy to be able to share it with you, and perhaps with more people. Jake finished typing and showed the draft script to Bill, who read it carefully. He felt his heart race as he saw his words transformed into a text that would soon be shared with thousands of people. So, what do you think? Asked Jake, waiting for his opinion. I can't thank you enough, Jake. To see it here, to see that my ideas can become a story that will impact someone, it's special. Thank you for your trust. Jake smiled, putting his hand on Bill's shoulder once again. I'm the one who thanks you, Bill. Having you here is an honor, and I can't wait to see how much we create together. So, in that bright studio, they finished the script talking about ideas and possibilities. Bill truly felt part of something bigger, a purpose that went beyond any financial reward. That day, he not only learned how to create a script, but rediscovered his own value. As they left the studio, Jake took one last look at Bill, who was visibly moved. Ready to come back tomorrow? Jake asked, smiling. Bill nodded, his heart light. Tomorrow, and every day you need me. That evening, Bill returned home with a heart full of new hope. As he entered, he was greeted by his grandchildren, who were waiting anxiously to hear how his first day in his new job had been, a job that Bill himself could hardly believe he had. They surrounded him with questions, as he sat on the sofa and tried to explain, simply, what he had done in Jake's studio. So, Grandpa, are you a scriptwriter now? Asked Jimmy, his eyes wide with admiration. Bill laughed awkwardly. Well, something like that, my boy. But you know, it's more than that. I'm going to tell stories that other people can watch and be inspired by. Stories about courage, hope, and family. The grandchildren looked at him with pride and admiration. And Bill felt that, for their sake, it was worth the challenge of trying something completely new. He knew it wasn't an easy job, but the chance to be part of something so special and at the same time be able to give the boys a better future gave him the strength to keep going. The next morning, Bill arrived at the studio in the same mood as the first day. Jake was already waiting for him with a smile on his face. Ready for another day of stories? Jake asked, excited. Ready, yes, Jake? I've been thinking of some ideas that might be good, replied Bill, pulling a notebook out of his pocket. Jake was amazed to see the notebook full of notes and scribbles. He hadn't expected Bill to be so dedicated overnight. Have you been thinking about all this since yesterday? He asked, surprised. Bill gave a shy but proud smile. You know how it is. When an idea comes along, you can't let it go. Jake nodded, understanding Bill's enthusiasm. Perfect, Bill. Let's see what you brought. As he read through Bill's ideas, Jake felt like he was looking at something rare. The stories were simple, but with an emotional depth that he knew his audience would appreciate. Bill, this idea here. Jake pointed to a note about a story about overcoming and family. I think that's going to be the next one. It has everything to do with what I want to show on the channel. Bill smiled, pleased. He hadn't expected his ideas to be accepted so quickly, but seeing Jake enthusiastic about his words made him feel at home. I'm glad you liked it, Jake. This story is inspired by something I went through when my children were young. I guess. These things stay with us, don't they? Jake nodded in agreement. Exactly, Bill. That's what people want to see. Something real that connects with them. Let's make this script together. And so they spent the day putting together every detail of that new story. Jake guided the process, but always left room for Bill to add his ideas, making the text more personal and real. After hours of work, they finally arrived at the final version of the script. Jake read aloud what they had written, and Bill's eyes filled with emotion as he heard his own words come to life. It's amazing, Jake. I never imagined I'd see something of mine narrated like this. Jake smiled, satisfied. And this is just the beginning, Bill. Get ready, because now that you're on the team, we're going to be creating a lot more stories like this. Before leaving the studio, Jake asked one last question. Bill, I know you're doing your best for this opportunity, but tell me, is there anything else I could do for you or your family? Anything you need? Bill hesitated, not knowing how to answer. He thought about Jimmy and the treatment he needed, but he had already accepted that it was a distant dream, something he might never be able to achieve. Jake, You've already done so much for me. Just giving me this chance, letting me be a part of it, that's more than I could ever ask for." Jake looked at him for a moment, but didn't insist. He knew that Bill was a proud man and wanted to achieve things through his own efforts. "I understand, Bill. Just know that if you need me, I'm here." When he left the studio, Bill walked through the streets with a mixture of gratitude and hope. Working alongside Jake was more than he had ever dreamed of, and every day he felt more motivated. For him, this job was more than just an opportunity to tell stories. It was a way to change his own life and perhaps give his grandchildren a better future. When he got home, his grandchildren came running to meet him once again. They surrounded him, full of curiosity and joy. "Grandpa, did you tell any more stories today?" Jimmy asked, holding his grandfather's hand. Bill bent down to the boy's height and smiled proudly. "Yes, my dears. And you know what's even better? You are my greatest inspiration. Every story I tell, every word I write, is with you in mind." The grandchildren smiled, hugging Bill tightly, and he felt complete. At that moment, he realized that no matter what happened, he had already found his purpose. Every story he helped create was a tribute to them, a tribute to love and family. And that, for him, was the greatest prize anyone could have. The new day brought Bill a sense of lightness, but also responsibility. He now felt that his work on Jake's channel wasn't just about telling stories. It was about creating something that could touch people and perhaps inspire them. Jake's studio, with all its lights and equipment, was already starting to feel familiar, like a second home. Bill felt that every day, the space was filling up more with his own words and ideas. As soon as he arrived, Jake welcomed him with his usual enthusiasm. "Good morning, Bill. Ready for another story?" Jake asked, smiling. Bill nodded, but there was something in his eyes that caught Jake's attention. "Jake, I was thinking, I have a few ideas, but one in particular. It's a story that might be a bit personal, but I think it could help a lot of people." Jake stopped what he was doing, completely attentive. He knew that when Bill brought something personal, it usually had a depth and sincerity that few could convey. "I'm listening. Beat. Tell me what you have in mind." Bill took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "The idea is about a father who raises his grandchildren alone, facing all kinds of difficulties. He tries to give them everything he can, even if it's little. And in the end, he realizes that despite the difficulties, he has managed to teach them important values, such as honesty and respect." Jake listened intently, his eyes shining. He knew that this was Bill's story, told in a subtle way. And more than that, he understood that this was the moment when Bill was opening up to a vulnerability that could deeply touch his audience. "Bill, this is a powerful story. I think a lot of people will identify with it. Let's build it together." The two sat down and started working on the script, discussing every detail. Jake encouraged Bill to add small details from everyday life, simple things that would reveal the silent love that this grandfather had for his grandchildren. As they built the narrative, Bill's eyes seemed to shine with the intensity of the memories he brought up. And perhaps the character could show his grandchildren how small acts of kindness make a difference, Bill suggested, as he wrote down his ideas. Jake agreed excitedly. Yes, he can teach that by sharing what little he has with his neighbors, showing that even small things can become big acts. Bill smiled, feeling that he was on the right track. He knew that, through this story, he was somehow revealing pieces of himself, and that made the work even more special. Hours later, the script was complete. Jake read the text aloud, and they both sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the depth of the story. Jake was visibly moved and turned to Bill, grateful to be able to share something so genuine with the public. "Bill, this script, it's incredible. Seriously, it's one of the most touching stories we've ever created." Bill smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and vulnerability. "I think sometimes we just need to show that there is beauty in simplicity, Jake. Many people go through difficulties, but they have a strength that keeps them going. And I wanted this story to be a reflection of that." Jake nodded, respectful of the depth that Bill brought. "And that's what we're going to convey. This story is a tribute to all the people who sacrifice themselves for their family, who face everything for love." The next day, the video aired. As the video ran, Bill felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He wasn't used to the idea that his story, even if disguised as fiction, would reach thousands of people. Later, when the first reactions started coming in, Jake showed Bill some of the comments. People from different places were leaving emotional messages, telling him how touched they felt, how much the story resembled their own. "Bill, look at this," said Jake, reading one of the comments aloud. "This story reminded me of my own grandfather, who took care of me when my parents couldn't. I didn't know anyone understood. I didn't know anyone understood what I went through. Thank you for telling that story." Bill read the words carefully, feeling each one. He had never imagined that his past and his experiences could somehow touch so many people. "I don't even know what to say, Jake. I just wanted to tell you something true, but I never thought anyone could really relate like that." Jake put a hand on Bill's shoulder, looking understanding. "And that's exactly what makes you such a great storyteller, Bill. You share what's real, and that's what the world needs." That moment marked a turning point in Bill's life. He realized that, more than telling stories, he was helping people to feel seen, understood. And for him, that was the greatest gift he could receive. A few days after the video's release, Bill sat down with Jake in the studio to review the viewing figures and read some more comments from the public. He was still getting used to the idea that such a personal story had touched so many people, and the messages kept coming, one more moving than the next. "Jake, I'm still amazed at how many people identified with that story. I never thought that something so personal could have such an impact," said Bill, looking at the screen with admiration. Jake smiled proudly. "Bill, you found a unique way to reach people. That's the power of honesty in stories. People notice when something comes from the heart." Bill nodded, still absorbing those words. He mentally flipped through the memories of his life, thinking of how many more stories he could share. However, one particular comment caught Jake's eye and made him stop scrolling. "Look at this one, Bill," said Jake, leaning over to show the screen. "I have a similar situation at home. My family is going through a difficult time, and this video has given us the strength to move on. Thank you for showing us that we're not alone." Bill read the words and was silent for a moment, his eyes watering. "Jake, that comment is exactly what I was hoping for. If my story can give someone a little comfort, then it's worth it." Jake approached with a more serious expression. "Bill, have you ever thought that maybe these stories can do more than just inspire? What if we could somehow create an action to help people going through these difficulties?" Bill looked at Jake intrigued. "What do you mean, Jake?" "I thought we could make a special series of videos. In each one, as well as telling a story, we could raise funds or create a help network to support people who are really going through difficult situations like those in the stories we've told." Bill thought about it, but the idea got him excited. He knew how small actions could make a difference and the impact it would have on people's lives. It was exactly the kind of project he had always wanted to see in the world. "Jake, that's amazing. I think we could really make a difference. A lot of people watch the videos and get emotional. Maybe they're just waiting for a way to contribute to something bigger." Jake nodded, smiling. "And that could start with you, Bill. Maybe, over time, we can create something bigger, something that involves the whole community." Bill was moved by the idea and began to imagine what it might be like. He thought about the people in his own neighborhood, the neighbors who helped him when he needed it, and how he could repay all that generosity. It was a cycle he wanted to start, a circle of support and mutual help. "Jake, I'll do it. Let's do it. I want every story to be a seed, something that inspires and brings real hope to people." Jake, encouraged by Bill's response, started jotting down ideas. "Perfect. We can start with a simple campaign, encouraging our audience to donate or help someone close to them. Maybe someone in their own family, a neighbor. It doesn't have to be something big, but something that will make a difference to those around them." Bill got even more excited. He found himself reflecting on his own past, on how in times of difficulty, the support of the community and close friends had been essential. For him, this was a way of passing on the kindness he had received. "Let's do it, Jake. Let's create a chain of kindness. And maybe, one day, these small actions will add up to something bigger than we can imagine." Jake looked at Bill with renewed respect, knowing that together they could start something that really mattered. That evening, on his way home, Bill was more determined than ever. He felt truly inspired, as if every story he helped create was a step towards positive change. He knew he couldn't change the world alone, but alongside Jake, he was sure they could make a real difference, one story at a time. Bill woke up early, still reflecting on the conversation he'd had with Jake the day before. The idea of using his stories to impact real people and inspire a chain of kindness was something that filled him with purpose. He had spent the night imagining ways to put this plan into practice and was eager to share his ideas with Jake. As soon as he arrived at the studio, he got straight to the point, barely able to contain his excitement. "Jake, I've been thinking, what if, as well as encouraging people to help those around them, we also told stories of people who are already doing this in their communities? I think that could inspire even more people." Jake smiled, noticing Bill's enthusiasm. "That's an incredible idea, Bill. I like the idea of showcasing real-life heroes, people who make a difference every day but often go unnoticed." He paused, thinking, "I think these stories of ordinary people who do small things to improve the world can touch audiences in a very special way." Bill nodded, pleased that Jake had understood exactly what he wanted to convey. "Exactly. We can interview these people, give a voice to those who have never had the chance to be heard. Maybe, if we show that kindness is within everyone's reach, other people will feel motivated to act." Jake was already grabbing his notepad, scribbling down ideas, and planning the new series. "Bill, I think we're going to need a name for this series. Something that captures the spirit of the project. Something that makes people feel that this is an opportunity to be part of something bigger." Bill was deep in thought, searching for words to express what he felt. After a few seconds, he smiled, as if a light had gone on inside him. "How about the Chain of Good?" he suggested, looking at Jake expectantly. Jake thought about the name and then nodded with a smile on his face. "Perfect, Bill. Simple and direct. It sends out the exact message we want to convey. The Chain of Good." With the name decided, the two began to discuss the practical details of the project. Bill wanted each episode to be special, so that each person interviewed could really show the impact of their actions and inspire the public to do the same. He suggested that, in addition to the stories of people who helped, each episode should provide practical tips on how anyone could contribute to the community, even with simple gestures. "Jake, we can show that helping others doesn't have to be something big. It can start with a smile, a small favor, even a friendly conversation. Sometimes people just need someone to listen to them," said Bill, his voice filled with emotion. Jake nodded, admiring Bill's sensitivity. "That's exactly it, Bill. I believe that if we can show that anyone can make a difference, we'll really touch people. And with your life experience, that message will be even more powerful." They spent the rest of the day planning the first episode of the series. Jake suggested that they start with someone from Bill's own community, someone he knew and who could represent everything that Chain of Good stood for. Bill, without hesitation, thought of an old friend called Sam, a gentleman who devoted much of his time to caring for abandoned animals, even though he had few resources. "I've known Sam for years. He's a simple man, but he does everything he can for the animals in the neighborhood. Whenever he finds an abandoned cat or dog, he takes it in, looks after it, and tries to find a home for it. I think he'd be a great example for us to start with." Jake was excited by the idea. "It sounds perfect, Bill. Let's pay him a visit, record a bit of his daily life, and show the world the impact one person can have, even with limited resources." The next day, the two of them headed to Sam's house, carrying the recording equipment and a heart full of anticipation. When they arrived, Sam was surprised but happy to see Bill and Jake. He, who had never thought of being interviewed, was a little nervous at the sight of the cameras, but Bill reassured him. "Sam, we just want to show what you do for the animals. Your work deserves to be seen. You don't have to worry about the cameras. Just be yourself." Sam nodded, still a little shy, but soon loosened up as he talked about his passion for caring for animals. He took Bill and Jake to the backyard, where there were some dogs and cats that he had recently rescued. He talked about the difficulties he faced, the times when he had to ask neighbors for help to feed the animals, and the joys of seeing an animal found on the streets finally find a home. While recording, Jake and Bill realized that, more than telling Sam's story, they were conveying something greater, a concrete example of how kindness manifests itself in different ways. At the end of filming, Jake thanked Sam with emotion. "Sam, Thank you for showing us that kindness is in every little gesture. Your story is sure to inspire many people to do the same." Sam smiled, visibly moved. "I only do what I believe is right, Jake. These animals need someone to look after them. If everyone did a little, the world would be a much better place." When they returned to the studio, Jake and Bill were filled with emotion and inspired by Sam's simplicity and determination. They knew they had captured something special. The moment they started editing the video, they could already see the impact that this content would have. Jake turned to Bill as they watched the first cut of the episode. "Bill, I think we did it. That's the essence of the chain of good. And it all started with your vision, your desire to turn stories into actions." Bill smiled, pleased and thrilled. "Jake, this is just the beginning. I believe we can do much more. If each story can plant a seed of kindness in someone, then we're on the right track." That night, as they uploaded the video to the channel, Jake and Bill felt that something special was happening. They didn't know how far the chain of good could go, but they were sure that they were starting something powerful, a real chain of transformation that, like them, would touch the hearts of many. After the premiere of the first episode of the Chain of Good series, Bill and Jake were amazed by the public's reaction. Within hours, the video had accumulated thousands of views, and more than that, an avalanche of emotional comments from people who wanted to be part of that chain of kindness. Many told their own stories about how small gestures of compassion had transformed their lives, or how they themselves had been helped in times of difficulty. In the studio, Bill read the comments with a mixture of surprise and emotion. "Jake, look at this," he said, pointing to a comment. "I'm organizing with some neighbors to set up a small fundraiser for the animals in the neighborhood. Your video was the inspiration we needed." Jake smiled, realizing that Bill's idea had become more than a story. It was a real movement. "I knew this series was going to touch people, but I didn't expect anything like this so quickly. It's amazing to see how people have connected with Sam's story and the message we wanted to convey." Bill nodded, absorbing the force of the impact they had made. "I think we're seeing the start of something bigger, Jake. People are understanding that every little gesture can make a difference." Jake agreed, but he also knew that they needed to maintain the public's enthusiasm. They needed to show other stories, to take the chain of good to even more people. "Bill, we need to choose the next story carefully. Something as powerful as Sam's, but that shows another side of goodness. You know?" Bill thought for a moment, then smiled as he remembered someone special. "I know someone who I think would be perfect for this. She's Mrs. Emily, a neighbor who, even though she's struggling financially, always helps new families in the community. She prepares meals, donates clothes, and is always willing to listen and give advice. She doesn't have much, but she shares what she can." Jake got excited. "Perfect, Bill. Let's talk to her. I think the public will be inspired by seeing someone who, even without many resources, does so much for others." The next day, they went to Emily's house. When they arrived, they were greeted by a quiet lady with a warm smile. Emily was the kind of person who seemed to exude kindness, and her calm voice conveyed an immediate sense of peace. "Bill, what a nice surprise. And who is your friend?" she asked, looking at Jake curiously. "Emily, this is Jake, my friend and partner in the video project. We came here to learn more about the beautiful work you do for the community, and if you allow us, we want to share your story with more people." Emily, a little shy, looked at them both, surprised by the proposal. "Oh, Bill, I don't do anything special. I just try to help in any way I can. People need each other, and I do what I can." Jake smiled, noticing Emily's humility. "And that's exactly what we want to show, Emily. Sometimes what seems small to us is huge to those who receive it. Your story can inspire others to do the same." Convinced of the importance of the project, Emily accepted and invited them in. They spent the morning chatting, while Jake and his team recorded the stories and gestures of generosity that Emily shared with the community. Emily talked about how she started helping, driven by the desire to give back the help she received when she arrived in the neighborhood many years ago. She prepared meals for families in difficulty, offered clothes, and even looked after children when their parents needed help. With each story, Jake and Bill felt like they were witnessing a real-life heroine. "Emily, what motivates you to keep helping even with so little?" Jake asked, fascinated by her simplicity. Emily thought for a moment before answering. I think that when you go through difficulties, you understand how important it is to have someone by your side. It's like a chain. Someone helped me when I needed it, so now it's my turn to help others. It's the way I've found to make sense of what I've experienced. Bill and Jake looked at each other, touched by the depth of that answer. They knew that those words had the power to inspire even more people to get involved in the chain of good. At the end of the day, Jake thanked Emily for sharing her story and left with a promise. Emily, thank you for having us and for opening your heart. Let's do what we can to make sure this story reaches as many people as possible. And maybe more people will be inspired to do what you do. Emily smiled gratefully. Thank you, Jake. If it can bring something good to someone, then it's worth it. On the way back to the studio, Bill and Jake talked about how the experience had impacted them. For Bill, Emily's story was a reminder that generosity didn't need big resources. It flourished in small actions, in the silent care that someone gave to others. Jake, I think we're on the right track. Each story is a seed of kindness that we're planting, said Bill, reflecting on the project. Jake nodded, smiling. And the amazing thing, Bill, is that it's transforming not only those who watch it, but also us. I see each story in a different way now, with more respect and admiration. And I know the audience feels it too. When they arrived at the studio, they began to review the images and edit the video. Carefully, they highlighted Emily's most inspiring words, the small gestures that showed how great her generosity was. At the end of the work, they were both satisfied with the result. That evening, when they uploaded the video to their channel, they knew they had shared something special. With Emily's story, they hoped that more people would realize the power of small gestures and feel motivated to take action. Over the next few hours, the comments started pouring in, full of thanks and messages of support, each one showing that the chain of good was growing. The days following the release of Emily's video were intense for Bill and Jake. The public was as engaged as ever, and the Chain of Good series seemed to take on a life of its own. Comments and messages kept pouring in from all over, many telling how they had been inspired to help their own neighbors, while others shared how the series reminded them of loved ones who had also always dedicated generous gestures to their communities. Jake and Bill met in the studio, reviewing the impact of the project and looking for ways to keep the audience engaged. Bill, I think we're at a crucial point. People are connecting with Chain of Good in a way I never imagined, and I feel we can do even more. Jake commented, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. Bill nodded with a proud smile. It's true, Jake. I never imagined that the stories I told would go so far. But maybe this is the time to make that chain even more real, something that people can actually experience. Jake raised his eyebrows, curious. What do you mean, Bill? What do you have in mind? Bill took a deep breath before answering, with a determined glint in his eye. I've been thinking about organizing a community event, something where people can meet up, bring their own stories, and maybe help each other out right there. It could be a swap fair or even a day of free services. Can you imagine? Jake smiled, visibly impressed by the idea. Bill, that's great. A Chain of Good event, where people can get together and take practical action. And maybe we can film the event to show our audience how it's possible to bring a community together for something good. The idea of an event where the series could step off the screen and come to life was more than inspiring. It seemed like the natural next step for the project. Jake could already see the venue, the people gathered, and how it could all be the start of a new stage for the channel. Let's do it, Bill. We'll start small, here in the neighborhood, and see how the community reacts. I'm sure it'll be a success. The two spent the next few days organizing the details. Bill contacted local residents, while Jake used his social networks to publicize the event. The idea was simple, a gathering where anyone could bring something to share, be it an item, a service, or simply a story. The name Chain of Good Day soon spread throughout the community. On the big day, Bill arrived early at the venue, a community square full of trees and surrounded by families he had known for years. Soon people started arriving with food, clothes, and even books to exchange. There were makeshift stalls and a long table where anyone could put whatever they wanted to share. Jake, with his camera in hand, recorded every detail, but this time, the event wasn't just for the channel. It was a celebration of something bigger. Bill, look at this, said Jake, pointing to a lady who was handing out homemade cookies and chatting animatedly with some young people. Bill looked around, delighted. He saw the spirit of togetherness in every person who came along and offered to help in some way. Some neighbors organized a bicycle repair shop. Others offered free haircuts. Even the children seemed to be involved, helping to pack the donated food for those who needed it. That's what I've always talked about, Jake. This community has always had a huge heart. It just needed a push to show it to the world, said Bill, visibly moved. As they walked around the square, they heard some people telling their own stories of how they had been helped in difficult times and how it inspired them to do the same for others. Jake approached a man who was talking about how he had received help to renovate his house after a storm. So, do you feel that Chain of Good has really made a difference here? Jake asked, curious. The man nodded firmly. Absolutely. This event is proof that when everyone does a little, the result is huge. It's incredible to see how everyone is pulling together. Bill heard those words and felt a warmth in his chest. This event was everything he had dreamed of, a moment of unity and genuine exchange between people who, in some way, had been inspired by the channel stories. Towards the end of the event, a woman with 2 small children approached Bill. She was carrying a bag with a few items and a shy smile. "You're Bill, right? The gentleman who makes those videos?" she asked in a soft voice. Bill nodded and smiled. "Yes, that's me. And how are you?" She smiled, visibly moved. "I wanted to say thank you. My children and I watched Mrs. Emily's video, and it gave us enormous strength. I've always struggled and felt alone, but seeing how she helps even though she has so little inspired me to come here and contribute too. I hope I can make a difference, even if it's a small one." Bill felt his eyes water when he heard her words. He put his hand on her shoulder with a sincere look. "What you're doing is more than enough. That's how it starts, with a simple gesture. And from what I can see, you're already creating your own chain of good." At the end of the day, as the sun began to set and people said their goodbyes, Jake and Bill stood in the square, observing the now empty place, but full of the memories of that transformative event. Jake looked at Bill with a satisfied smile. "Bill, we did it. I think today we proved that this chain goes far beyond videos. It's happening here and now thanks to you." Bill smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "It wasn't just for me, Jake. It was for everyone who brought a bit of themselves and showed the best they had. Today, more than ever, I believe that the world can change one story at a time." At that moment, they both realized that Chain of Good wasn't just a series or an event. It was a promise that together they could continue to inspire, help and unite people for something bigger and lasting. A few days after the Chain of Good Day event, Bill and Jake returned to the studio to review the images and prepare a special video about the meeting. For them, the event had been a true celebration of the community, proof that solidarity was alive. As they watched the footage, they remembered every smile, every hug, and every small donation that made a difference to someone. Jake, visibly moved, turned to Bill. "Bill, I don't think I've ever felt something so powerful in a video before. Each person there brought something unique, and it shows how much the chain of good is growing. I think we're only at the beginning." Bill nodded, also moved. "You know, Jake, looking at all this, I realize that we're creating something that really matters. Not just for our audience, but for ourselves. This event, it changed the way I see the world." As they continued editing, Bill began to reflect on the stories he had heard at the event and how each of them was in itself an example of resilience and empathy. Inspired, he suggested that the final video should include people's testimonies, letting them tell the impact that Chain of Good had had on their lives. "Jake, what if we let people speak directly? No nerastin, no filters. Just their voices. I think the audience would connect even more." Jake smiled, pleased with the idea. "Great, Bill. That touch will make everything more real, closer. Let's do it." They spent the night working, putting the video together in a sequence that began with Bill himself talking about what motivated the Chain of Good and how he dreamed of seeing people come together. The recording then moved on to the scenes of the event. Each face, each gesture of solidarity recorded with the utmost affection. Finally, they got to the testimonies. People of all ages spoke about what the Chain of Good had meant to them. One woman thanked Emily's video for giving her the strength to help her own neighborhood. A man told how Sam's example had inspired him to take care of the abandoned animals near his home. Each story carried an emotional charge that filled the studio with meaning. When they had finished editing, Jake gave a final play for them to watch the complete result. As the video progressed, they were both silent, immersed in the stories they had helped to create. When the last image disappeared from the screen, Jake sighed, deeply moved. "Bill, I don't even know what to say. I think this is the most important video we've ever made." Bill nodded, his eyes watering. "I feel it too, Jake. This video is more than just content. It's a testimony that kindness can be powerful." Jake took a deep, decisive breath. "Let's publish it. I'm sure the public will feel everything we feel." The next day, the video went live, and the response from the public was immediate. Emotional comments started pouring in, many sharing how each story had touched their lives in a unique way. Some told how the event had inspired them to take action in their own communities. Others talked about the impact that small gestures of kindness had had on their routines. In the midst of so many comments, one in particular caught Jake and Bill's attention. It was a message from a young woman called Sarah, who said she was going through a difficult situation and felt she had no strength to carry on. She thanked us for each story and mentioned that, thanks to the video, she had found a small spark of hope and courage. Bill, reading the comment, felt a tightness in his chest. "Jake, we need to respond to her. She needs to know that she's not alone." Jake agreed, and, together, they wrote a loving reply, offering Sarah support and encouragement. They also invited her to take part in the next Chain of Good event if she was interested. A few days later, Sarah replied to the message, thanking them for the invitation and expressing how Chain of Good had been a turning point in her life. She said that, inspired by the project, she started volunteering at a local shelter and found that helping other people made her feel stronger. When they read the response, Bill and Jake realized that what they were doing went far beyond telling stories. They were actually transforming lives. "Bill, the Chain of Good is no longer just a series or an event. It's a movement. We're building a real community of people who want to help each other," said Jake, smiling proudly. Bill smiled back, feeling genuine joy. "It makes me think of all the times someone has helped me, Jake. And now, to be able to inspire others to do the same, there's nothing that makes me happier." They continued to receive messages and stories from people like Sarah, who found in the Chain of Good a reason to keep going or a way to connect with their own community. Each message was a reminder that the project was growing beyond expectations. In the studio, Jake put his hand on Bill's shoulder and spoke sincerely. "Bill, thank you for bringing this idea to me. I feel like we're doing something much bigger than we imagined." Bill, overcome with emotion, replied with his voice breaking, "Jake, thank you. Without you, I would never have been able to share this with the world." As they continued working on the project, they both knew that the impact of Chain of Good would continue to grow, reaching more and more people. More than a channel or a series, what they had created was a mission, a hope that was spreading, showing the world that goodness was within everyone's reach. Weeks after the event and the impact the video had generated, Bill and Jake realized that the Chain of Good was spreading faster than they had imagined. People from various cities and even other states began writing to the channel, telling how they had been inspired to start small support projects in their own communities. Jake began to see the series in a completely new way. He knew he had to find ways to keep the movement alive. One afternoon in the studio, while they were going over the new commentaries, Jake turned to Bill with an idea. "Bill, what do you think about starting a series of visits? We could go to these cities and meet the people who have been inspired by the Chain of Good. Show them how they are applying it in their own communities." Bill smiled enthusiastically. "Jake, this is incredible. Not only are we continuing the series, but we're also showing that these gestures of kindness have no borders. Let's go where that current takes us." They spent the next few days planning their first trip, choosing a nearby town where a group of volunteers had organized a food and clothing drive for homeless people. Bill was eager to meet the people who had been impacted by his story in some way. He knew that, more than telling a new story, they were there to celebrate the actions of these people. On the morning of the trip, Bill and Jake hit the road with a car full of equipment. The road was quiet, and as they drove, They chatted about what they hoped to find. Jake, do you think this could really make a difference? I mean, just the fact that we're there showing them what they're doing? Bill asked with a reflective expression. Jake looked at him, smiling. Bill, I think so. People like to be seen, and by giving visibility to what they're doing, we show the world that there are unsung heroes everywhere. I think this will inspire even more people to join the chain. When they arrived in the city, they were met by a group of volunteers who were waiting for them. Everyone seemed excited and a little shy in front of the cameras, but they soon felt more at ease in the warm presence of Bill, who made a point of greeting each one and thanking them for what they were doing. Among the volunteers, a young woman called Lisa stood out. She had started the campaign after watching the Chain of Good video, and her enthusiasm for the project was evident. Bill, Jake, I can't thank you enough for being here. I started this campaign because I wanted to do something that would make a difference. And seeing you here makes me sure that we're on the right track. Bill held Lisa's hands lovingly. Lisa, you're the one who's making a difference. This chain is yours too, and we're here to support what you've already started. Jake started recording while Lisa showed the donations they had collected and introduced some of the people who had helped. With each story, the team felt they were recording something special, a kind of magic that only genuine kindness could generate. During a break, while Lisa was organizing the donations, Bill took the opportunity to talk to some of the residents who had received help. A man called George, who had been living on the streets for more than a decade, told his story with emotion. I always thought that people didn't care about me, you know? But seeing these young people, seeing Lisa and all the work they've done, it's given me hope again. I hope they know how much it means to people like me. Bill, his eyes watering, nodded. George, you're as much a part of this chain as anyone else. We're all in this together, and you deserve every help, every gesture of affection you've received here. Jake captured the conversation with sensitivity, knowing that George's every word was a reminder of the importance of this work. At the end of the afternoon, after hours of recording and several emotional conversations, Bill and Jake met up with the volunteers for one last thank you. You're doing something great here, Jake said gratefully. The chain of good is only possible because of people like you, who don't expect recognition, but are willing to help because they believe the world can be a better place. Bill agreed, adding, never forget that kindness is a powerful force. You've changed the lives of many people here today, and that's something no one will ever forget. Lisa and the volunteers said goodbye, thanking them for their presence and support. On the way home, silence overtook the car. Bill gazed at the landscape, feeling more inspired than ever. He knew that this was only the beginning of a journey, and that each city they visited would represent another piece in the construction of something much bigger. Jake, after a few minutes of silence, broke the tranquility with a thought. You know, Bill, I always thought the canal was just a place to tell stories. But now, I see that it's a meeting place, a chance to bring people together. Bill smiled, looking at his friend. Jake, that's exactly it. Chain of Good doesn't belong to me, you, or the channel. It belongs to all of us. And as long as there are people like Lisa, George, and all the others, this chain will continue to grow. At that moment, they both realized that Chain of Good was no longer just a series or a temporary initiative. It was a life mission, something that, by sharing each story, transformed not only the world around them, but also their own hearts. After the inspiring trip, Bill and Jake returned to the studio with a new perspective on the project. They felt that Chain of Good now had an even deeper purpose and that they needed to keep bringing those stories to more and more people. The energy they found in each community they visited brought a sense of responsibility, and they knew that this movement was only just beginning. The next morning, while reviewing the footage from the last trip, Jake looked at Bill with an idea. Bill, what do you say we do a special episode with a compilation of these visits? Not only showing what people are doing, but also issuing a challenge to our audience. Something like, how about starting the Chain of Good in your town? Bill smiled, understanding exactly what Jake meant. That's a brilliant idea, Jake. We can encourage people to start with small gestures, like collecting food, offering help to a neighbor, and maybe they can share what they've done with us so we can show it on the channel. Jake was excited about the possibility. Exactly. And we're going to open a section on the channel to receive these stories, videos and photos of the actions that people do. That way, we can keep spreading this chain around the world. They spent the day planning the special video, which would begin with an introduction from Bill, explaining the impact each of the trips had had on their lives. While they were writing the script, Jake remembered something important. "Bill, I think we need to be direct when talking about the impact that each action has on the lives of those who receive and those who offer help. The chain of good is not just about material donations, but about emotional support, presence, and listening." Bill nodded, knowing how essential this point was. "That's true, Jake. Sometimes people just need to know that they're not alone. And what we're building here is a support network, a place where everyone can feel welcomed and encouraged to do good." With the script finalized, they started shooting the video. The camera focused on Bill as he spoke, his calm, steady voice conveying a sincerity that touched the heart. "Today, we want to invite you to be part of the chain of good, not just by watching, but also by taking action. It could be a small gesture, perhaps helping a neighbor with their shopping, or even offering a kind word to someone going through a difficult time. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, counts." Jake interspersed Bill's speech with scenes from the visits to the communities and the testimonies of the people who took part in the events. With each cut, the video conveyed a powerful message about the collective impact that everyone can have by giving a little of themselves. When they had finished recording, Jake looked at Bill with a satisfied smile. "I think this video is one of the best things we've ever done, Bill. It's all here. The purpose, the inspiration, and now the invitation for the public to be a real part of it." Bill smiled back, touched. "I feel like we're planting seeds of goodness, Jake. And I hope that, somehow, these seeds will blossom all over the world." The day the video went live, the channel was buzzing like never before. The response was immediate, with people commenting on how they were willing to start small actions in their communities. Some said they already had ideas for local projects, while others promised to start helping their neighbors and colleagues. Throughout the week, the channel was flooded with stories and photos of people taking part in the chain of good. There were videos of groups organizing donations, families cooking meals to distribute to those in need, and even children organizing small campaigns in their schools. Jake and Bill were moved by every report that came in. "Jake, look at this," said Bill, pointing to a video of a woman called Carla who organized the community bazaar to raise funds for needy families. Jake watched the video with a broad smile. "This is incredible, Bill. We're seeing the impact of chain of good in real time. It's as if each person is a new chain, linking one city to another." Over the following weeks, the shares continued to grow, and Jake and Bill's channel became a real meeting point for people who wanted to share their initiatives. The studio was now frequently visited by local people who came to tell their own stories and thank the channel for its encouragement. One morning, Bill received a special letter from a young woman called Anna, who described how the movement had helped her overcome a period of depression. She explained that by getting involved in community activities and helping others, she had found a new reason to go on and a purpose in her life. Bill read the letter with tears in his eyes and showed it to Jake. "Jake, stories like this, that's why we're doing all this. To know that somehow we've managed to bring a little light into someone's life, there's nothing more valuable." Jake nodded, touched. "Bill, I think we found our mission. The chain of good isn't just about helping. It's about transforming lives, including our own." They were both silent, absorbing the impact of everything they had built together. They knew that from then on, Chain of Good would continue to grow and touch hearts, showing that, even in difficult times, kindness and compassion have the power to transform the world. As they prepared for the next episode, they knew that each story, each video, and each small action was part of something much bigger. And with that, they were sure that the chain of good had only just begun. The impact of the chain of good had grown much more than Jake and Bill had ever imagined. With each new video, more people joined the movement, and the stories they received came from all over the country. Spontaneous acts of kindness and support multiplied, generating a network of compassion that transcended cities and states. Then one morning while Bill was having his coffee and reading some of the new comments, Jake's phone rang. It was a producer from a major television station. "Jake, this is Thomas from the national channel. We've been following the work you and Bill have been doing with Chain of Good, and we'd like to invite you for a live interview." Our audience would love to hear directly from you about the impact you're having." Jake was surprised and immediately accepted the invitation, hardly able to believe that the project had gone so far. He hung up the phone and turned to Bill, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Bill, you won't believe it. We've been invited for a live interview on a national TV program." Bill, who had never imagined his life would come to this, was paralyzed for a few seconds, his eyes wide. "Jake, are you serious? Do they really want to hear about Chain of Good on television?" Jake nodded, smiling. "Yes, and this is a unique opportunity. We can inspire even more people to be part of the chain, to take kindness to other places we haven't even reached yet." On the day of the interview, they were both nervous, especially Bill, who had never been in front of so many cameras in such a large studio. But when he saw the audience and felt the energy in the air, he remembered everything they had achieved and the impact they were having. That was more important than any nerves. During the interview, the presenter asked him to tell him how it all began. Jake talked about his desire to use his channel for something meaningful, and Bill, in a calm and emotional voice, told how his love for the community and his desire to help people had turned into this movement. The chain of good began with small stories, with simple gestures. But what we realized was that these small acts of generosity turned into something much bigger, something that people miss and want to see in the world, explained Bill, looking directly into the camera. "It's something that anyone can do. No matter where you are, there's always a way to help someone." The presenter, visibly moved, leaned forward. "Bill, what would you say to those watching now who want to be part of the chain of good, but don't know where to start?" Bill took a deep breath before answering. "I'd say start with your heart. Help doesn't have to be big or expensive. It could be a friendly word, a shared meal, or even a smile. The most important thing is that it comes from a genuine desire to see the other person well." The interview was a success, and soon after the broadcast, Jake and Bill were surprised by the number of messages and invitations they received. Within a few days, Jake's phone rang again, this time with an invitation to speak at a major charity event. The proposal was for them to share their experiences, inspiring other organizations and people who also wanted to help transform the world. "Jake, this is all unbelievable," said Bill, as they prepared for the talk. "I never imagined that our work would take us this far. It's incredible, Bill, but this is just a beginning. If we can inspire these organizations to join us, imagine how much we can expand the chain of good." At the event, the talk was given to a packed auditorium. People from all walks of life and from various parts of the country were there to hear the story of Chain of Good. Jake began the presentation by showing some of the videos and sharing the stories of Sam, Emily, and Lisa, the unsung heroes who inspired everyone. Each story was followed by applause and emotional looks from the audience. When it was Bill's turn to speak, he took a deep breath and shared something he rarely says in public. "The truth is that for many years I lived on very little. I know what it's like to be in need and dependent on the help of others. What I'm doing today is a way of repaying the generosity I've received, and I hope that everyone here will find a way to help too. You have no idea how much even the smallest gesture can change a life." The reaction from the audience was overwhelming. After the talk, a representative of a large company approached the two with a proposal that left them stunned. "Jake, Bill, on behalf of my company, I want to say that we are deeply touched by your work, and we want to be part of the chain of good. We would like to offer you a sponsorship so that you can take this project to more communities and help even more people." Jake and Bill exchanged incredulous glances. This was something they had never anticipated. "We're speechless," Jake replied, almost out of breath. "With this support, we'll be able to reach so many more cities, offer more donations, help local projects, really expand the chain of good." "That's exactly what we want," replied the company representative. "Kindness is contagious, and we want to help you spread that chain." Back at the studio, Bill and Jake could hardly contain their excitement. They spent hours discussing how they would use the sponsorship and soon came up with the idea of creating an online platform, a website where anyone could share their initiative, exchange ideas, and organize aid campaigns in their own cities. "Jake, this is more than I ever imagined," said Bill, his eyes shining with gratitude. "This website is going to connect people in a way we've never been able to before. It's the chain of good coming to life in every city. in every home. Jake, with the same enthusiasm, continued. And best of all, we won't need to be everywhere at once. With this platform, each person could be a point in the chain, taking kindness and solidarity wherever they go. The next few days were dedicated to creating the website, which included a section for people to tell their stories, share their photos and videos, and connect with others who wanted to start actions in their area. There was also a calendar with chain of good dates and events, so that users could keep track of everything that was happening in the movement. When the site was launched, the response was surprising. People from all over the country signed up, sharing their own initiatives and creating support groups. The site quickly became a vibrant space where compassion was the driving force, and each new project represented a new connection in the chain of good. In the studio, Jake and Bill followed the repercussions of the site, thrilled. Jake, look at this. These are people from different places with different stories, but all connected by the same goal. It's the dream we've always had. Jake nodded with a smile of realization. Bill, the chain of good is now bigger than us. It's in the hands of the people in every community. And that's the most beautiful thing of all. They both realized that they had created something that would live on beyond them, something that would continue to expand, touching lives and inspiring acts of kindness all over the country. For Jake and Bill, the project was now a life mission. And with the support of thousands of people, they knew that Chain of Good was only at the beginning of its journey. If you enjoyed this video, comment your age and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if you'd like to see more content like this, we prepared the next video just for you. Click here to watch